Welcome to the Total Soccer Show and USMNT Weekly. It's our regular foray into all things men's national team. And today, we're looking at how far we've come from the last World Cup to this one. Specifically, the development and progress of players who featured in Qatar 4 years ago. Here we go. My name's Ryan Bailey. Joining me today, hello Taylor Rockwell. How are you, sir?
I'm nervous. I'm not going to lie. This question was intriguing to me. I was really excited to do this episode. I assumed it was going to be all like rosy, happy thoughts, and instead I'm left a little bit concerned about the state of the squad. Not fully concerned, just a little bit.
Don't be nervous, Taylor. We'll hold your hands. We're all here. We're all friends. It's all good. We're just having a chat.
Thanks.
And we're having a chat with Graham Ruthven. Graham, can you believe it's 4 years since we were watching the US in the World Cup doing shoeies in Bleacher Report's office in New York?
That feels like a different life. Yeah, I'd completely forgotten about that. I wonder if the shark costume is still kicking around the Bleacher Report offices.
They have it framed.
I stuffed it in my bag to take it home. It's another room.
Yeah.
They have it framed up on the wall in a shadow box, and the caption just says, "This is what Graham Ruthven wore when he briefly had a breakdown."
Yes, that breakdown is still continued.
Very good. Good stuff. Joe Lowery, how are you?
I'm great, man. I didn't expect to be casting my mind back to the depths of night at the 2022 World Cup. I mean, there were some special moments in that office. I feel like some of my most delirious moments of my entire life, maybe like 3 of the top 5, came in that office. And yes, one of them was watching Graham wear the shark costume. If you don't know what we're talking about, whoever has this video, you got to put it in the Discord again because it's gold and people need to see it as often as they can.
Very good. All right, here we go, USMNT Weekly. Actually, before here we go too soon because I want to tell you about patreon.com/Total Soccer Show, our bonus feed where you get bonus episodes, you get bonus video, including but not limited to Graham making beige Scottish food in his...
Oh, come on, tell me that didn't look good. Tell me you didn't want that.
That didn't look good.
And you also complimented my kettle as well. So.
You have a very nice home. It looks like a show home. I'll tell you that much, Graham. It's meticulous. Lovely fridge with only Iron Brew in it from what I could see from the video. Very good. On form.
That's Iron Brew fridge.
Yeah.
You got to have one.
You can see that if you join our Patreon, patreon.com/Total Soccer Show. Access to our Discord as well, where you get access to and you can become a part of the TSS Scouting Network. You can be assigned a young player to scout for the season and beyond. In fact, on this very episode, tune in to the end because we're going to be reading out some of your scouting reports, which we'll continue to do on this feed and on the bonus feed as well. Patreon.com/Total Soccer Show. Let's get to USMNT Weekly right now. We are basing this episode, as noted, on a listener question we received on our Discord from Alabama Footy 26, who asked us to compare and contrast every USMNT World Cup player in 2022 and see how they've developed since that tournament. Which players have improved, says Alabama Footy 26. Which players have declined? And does the influx of new players outweigh any declines from 2022 players? So, Taylor, what we propose we're going to do is go position by position, talk about the players, who's improved, who's declined, and then a little State of the Union, to coin a phrase for this week, at the end of the episode. How does that sound, Taylor?
Sounds good to me, my friend. I look forward to, being talked out of my spiral on certain players, but then being calmed about my enthusiasm for certain other players, except for Brendan Aronson, where I will hear no negativity from anyone named Joe Lowery.
Hey, you're going to be pleased, Taylor, with whether I think Aronson has declined, held steady, or improved. And that's sort of how I went about this, is I looked at all the players that were in that squad, broke them up into position groups, and I think we're going to talk about each one of those guys. Some probably for longer than others because they warrant it, and some maybe don't warrant a whole lot of discussion.
I've got 35 minutes on Jesus Ferreira.
I was sure you were going to say Ethan Horvath. I would have bet real money. I would bet Graham's Iron Brew stock on that. I was wrong. Graham, you're lucky I didn't make that bet. And I think the other interesting wrinkle here is, so as we go through comparing the pool from 22 to what the pool is now, right? So the goalkeeper pool, is the pool as a whole better now than it was before? Because I think for me, this was a really clarifying exercise heading into this next tournament of, well, where were expectations for the U.S. in 2022? Okay, they probably were about met in the grand scheme of things. What should they actually be this time around? Because is the team really better? Is it worse? Is it about the same? I think that's sort of what we're going to get into.
Yeah. Joe, I invite you to get into it right now. Why don't we start with the goalkeepers? The group, Ethan, Horvath, Matt Turner, and Sean Johnson in the 2022 squad. It's kind of similar to what we have now, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, those names are still popping up, which I think says a little something about the state of the current pool. For me, all three of these guys have declined. Where Matt Turner, I know this feels like forever ago to me. Matt Turner was the guy for the U.S., man. Like, he won that job in the build-up to the 2022 World Cup throughout that cycle. And between Matt Turner and the U.S.'s general defensive approach, they were the best team defensively in CONCACAF World Cup qualifying, in the Ocho, or whatever we ended up calling that, right? I mean, they had allowed the fewest expected goals in that stretch, and really heading into the World Cup, Greg Berhalter's vision for this team had sort of shifted, where originally it was, hey, we're going to be this team that disorganizes opponents with the ball. We're going to do all these cool build-up things and keep our wingers really wide and put our fullback into the half space and think about the possession stuff a lot. And then Berhalter slowly, but I think correctly, realized that the strength of the pool was not that stuff. The strength of the pool was MMA in midfield and a really good shot stopper in Matt Turner. And so that was crucial for the U.S. heading into the World Cup, and I think came up relatively well for the U.S., at least in the group stages of that tournament as well. Turner was an essential piece of that equation. He is not anymore. The European journey did not really shape up for him, although he's had some good moments along the way. And now he's trying to rediscover himself with New England. So I think Turner has declined, and I think the other two have as well. Or at least in Ethan Horvath's case, he's held steady. Back in MLS now, he's in a steadier position than he was bouncing around England. But I don't think anyone can credibly make an argument that Horvath has really moved up the ladder in this whole equation. And same for Sean Johnson, where he's 4 years older, or I guess not quite really, than he was at the last World Cup because of the timing of them. But he's now a DC United player and is trying to make sure that last season wasn't a blip. Like, it's just hard to look at those three guys and think that they have done anything but drop a level.
Yeah, and this is probably, I don't know if I'm skipping ahead here to the verdict on each position pool, but this is the position pool that I felt worst about in the entire squad, where this feels like there has been a meaningful regression from the options available to, Poch now and Berhalter in 2022. Because Matt Turner, you're absolutely right, Joe, Matt Turner was on a real upward trajectory in 2022, even at club level. Like, I know he never really made the breakthrough at Arsenal, but nonetheless, he'd made the move to Arsenal in 2022. He'd played a handful of competitive games in cup competitions leading up to the World Cup, and it feels like we would take that now, like in a macro sense. We would take someone as the second choice Arsenal goalkeeper now heading into 2026, and that's what we had in 2022. And even Ethan Horvath, he was first team for a Luton Town team that won promotion from the Championship that season. So feels like even now he would be further into the discussion than he is in 2026. And now we're looking at what's going to be Friis as number one, Matt Turner as the number two, and then like a blob of, I don't know, Patrick Schulte, Diego Kochen, a million, Chris Brady. There's a whole bunch of them there, but I feel worse about those options. I'd kind of forgotten that Zach Steffen wasn't included in this group. Obviously, that was a big storyline at the time. I guess I'd sort of memory hold that. He started 7 games in 2021 and 3 in 2022. Didn't go to the World Cup, which was brutal. I remember that story. But yes, even accounting for that, I feel worse about the US goalkeepers now than I did in 2022. And that's maybe as negative as I'm going to be on this show.
Graham, with every team that gets promoted, there's always that moment when they like reevaluate the squad and are like, okay, well, like a quarter of you will be playing in the Premier League next season. And it feels like Ethan Horvath was very much a like you, not you, and like and I think down he went. I think the move to Red Bull New York is a very smart one for him. I think it allows him to stabilize, it allows him to get some reps. I don't think it, unless he like stands on his head every single game, I don't think it really moves the needle for this particular World Cup. Joe, one other question of clarification. Not meant to be a gotcha question, but what were the bright spots for Matt Turner that you recall in his European tour?
Just that he actually got games with Arsenal. It's what Graham mentioned already, that he made that move and was valued by them and got on the field for one of the 10 biggest clubs on the planet. That's something that very, very few U.S. players in any spot have done.
Okay. I think with that said, I agree with you all that this is the one position group that I was definitely felt like was a downgrade from where we were.
Good thing it's not an important one, and that U.S. goalkeepers never have to come up big at World Cups. Anyway, continue.
I mean, that's what it is, right? Like that is the concern, is that so often successful World Cup runs or qualification runs have been rooted in having a goalkeeper who can make a difference on their own. It's Brad Friedel, it's Casey Keller, it's Brad Friedel again, I think. It's Tim Howard, obviously. It was Matt Turner even. And so it's not just that the three that we've talked about have sort of had a downturn. It's also that the other ones coming through haven't really cemented their spot. We assume Matt Friis will be the starter, but he only has like 13 caps or so for the United States at this point. And I don't think really anybody outside of maybe NYCFC supporters feel like that guy is the guy that can make the difference when the U.S. needs to. If anything, I feel like we still haven't really had that performance from him. We've had bits and pieces and moments for the U.S. where it felt like, okay, like that was good. He made that save. He didn't bobble that. But we haven't really had that one performance that we know we can rally around. And I don't think we've had that from any of the other candidates. And so it still feels like an unproven position group with the more proven entities having had that kind of downward trajectory of late.
All right. Shall we move the conversation to the centre-back pool, Taylor? Obviously, we can say that Tim Ream has improved because he's gone from living in London to Charlotte. He's done the Ryan Bailey lifestyle move. So that's a definite positive, right?
It is. That's what it is. That's what it's all about. Tim Ream in Charlotte. Now it's all good. This one, I think I had as a somewhat the same, maybe an improvement because Chris Richards. Because it really is Tim Ream 4 years later, maybe a few steps slower than he already was. So that feels like a slight downgrade. But then we would assume that it's Chris Richards instead of Walker Zimmerman. And no disrespect to the legend himself, Walker Zimmerman, but Chris Richards is just a better player and is better on the ball, generally speaking. Is better at, like, defensively, I think at this point, has more reps at a higher level. So I think it is an improvement. It's just also that the other players that were in that 2022 squad, I wouldn't say that they've had the greatest of time. Aaron Long, I would say, has declined and is definitely not a consideration at this point. CCV, I think, is kind of in the exact same boat that he was previously, where, and this is where I'm very much interested to hear what Graham has to say, but it feels like a player who we kind of understood his limitations and understood why Berhalter wasn't so enamored of him. And it doesn't seem like a ton of that has changed, other than that he's been a very reliable and solid defender for Celtic, but his distribution, his on-the-ball presence, I'm not sure how much better than that is. So it feels like Chris Richards is the major upgrade here, and then there's still a good few question marks around the rest of the pool.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I would say there's been a marginal improvement on 2022 to the squad now. Tim Ream, like, we shouldn't forget, Tim Ream forces his way late into the fold before the 2022 World Cup because he was in the form of his life for Fulham at the time. Like, his peak was late in the Premier League, and I think he ends up signing a new contract, a new extension at Fulham because basically they didn't want him to leave. His plan was to leave a little bit earlier than he did, and that's kind of around about the time of the 22 World Cup. So I'm trying not to forget that when we try and think of how well Chris Richards is playing right now. I think Ream, even though he was old at the last World Cup and is even older now, was playing at a really high level in 2022. Walker Zimmerman, kind of similar. I want to remember how we were a lot higher in Walker Zimmerman in 2022 than we are now. I think it's easy to forget those things sometimes when you move on like 3 or 4 years. He was, at the time, he was one of the best pure defenders in MLS for Nashville. A DP for Nashville, right? He was on a DP contract for Nashville. And he kind of still is one of the best pure defenders in MLS when he's fit, right? That's the big question with Walker Zimmerman now. And so, yeah, I feel like 2022, he started 30 games in 2022, which was a career high. So this felt like the peak for Walker Zimmerman. I also feel like it was the peak for CCV. At this time, he was a central pillar of Big Angie's Celtic team. Considering the other options, I still feel like I had a very strong argument. I know I've always banged the CCV drum, but I think he should have started more than just one game at the 22 World Cup. And then this season, the 22-23 season, and then 23-24 under Ange Postecoglou were the best seasons of his career to date. And right now, he's kind of out of the picture because he's still injured for Celtic. He's not going to be fit again until like late April. I think that maybe rules him out of World Cup contention. He's going to be pretty cold coming into this tournament. And then Aaron Long was the other one, as you said, Taylor, who right now is injured as well, so maybe not in consideration. But back in 2022, this was one of his more consistent years for the Red Bulls. He started 29 games in MLS that year. So again, like a player who was at a higher peak back then than he is now. But nonetheless, I think you look at Chris Richards, Tim Ream, Miles Robinson, Mark McKenzie was kind of like my 4 centre-backs I thought of. You can maybe bring Joe Scally into this pool as well, depending on the formation. I guess Alex Freeman to a certain extent too, although he's very much going to come up later in my fullback pool. But I think there's not a lot in it, but I think it's very marginally stronger now than it was back then.
I think I would be a bit more positive than that, just because I think Richards, who would have been at the last World Cup if he hadn't been injured, right? So he was fair. Absolutely going to play minutes of that tournament. Richards is just a really good player, and it's a little unfortunate that the U.S. doesn't have other good players around him because he's sort of been forced to play in this central center-back role for the U.S. when they are playing in a back three, and that's not the role he plays at Palace, nor is it the role that he's best in. But Ream, athletically, I don't think has declined so dramatically from 2022. I mean, the dude already really couldn't accelerate then, and we saw an opening weekend in MLS that he can't really accelerate now either. but I don't think you've lost a lot there, and you've gained one of the 3 or 4 best starting players in your team, right? So maybe that's a bit hyperbolic on Richards, but I think this position group is noticeably stronger than it was before. Again, how much of this matters, that's just one small part of this equation, but I think you're building towards something there.
Okay, so one position group is stock up, one is stock down so far in our conversation. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll keep going. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to USMNT Weekly. We're seeing if we're better off 4 years now than we were 4 years ago. I'm putting a lot of political analogies today. Sorry about that. Anyway, Graham, the fullbacks. We still got our Serginho Dests, our Anthony Robinsons in the pack. What are we thinking?
Yeah, so I'll just very quickly run through the fullbacks who were included in the 22 squad. So as you say, we had Serginho Dest. Wasn't actually in a great place at the time of the 22 World Cup. He was on loan at Milan, where he basically made no impact at all. I think had some injury trouble, which is not a surprise for Serginho Dest, but also just ended up frozen out at Milan. So didn't play much at all. And it wasn't clear what was next for him. He'd kind of been frozen out by Xavi Hernandez at Barcelona as well. So this tournament came with a big old question mark next to Serginho Dest. Anthony Robinson, he was a first-team player for Fulham, but maybe wasn't quite the influential figure that he would become for Fulham over the next couple of seasons. So I definitely think he has improved, although I am saying that in a season where Jedi hasn't really played much for Fulham this year, where he's struggling with injury. He's been in and out of the team with Ryan Sessegnon occasionally taking his place. I think more recently he has been starting games, so that is encouraging. But I'd like to see him continue that until the end of the season. And then the other 22 fullbacks were DeAndre Yedlin. I don't know why I'm struggling to pronounce names today more than usual. Kind of my thing. But anyway, played 34 games for pre-Messi Inter Miami, which feels like a completely different club when you think of that team. Then you had Joe Scally, who had already established himself at Gladbach really firmly, their first choice right back. His career at club level has been amazingly consistent in terms of just how many games he plays every single season. He has played 30 or more Bundesliga games for each of the last 5 seasons, and he'll do it again this year, albeit Gladbach are in a pretty bad way. Yeah, it is wild. And then finally we had Shaq Moore, who hadn't long signed for Nashville, having been in Spain for a few years. And so I feel that this group, the group we have now, is quite noticeably stronger when you consider it's probably Anthony Robinson, hopefully at his peak, has been at his peak over the last 18 months or so. Serginho Dest, who is playing regularly for PSV, with Alex Freeman, who we've spoken about at length on this show, has just moved to Villarreal, is already in the first team picture there. And even like Max Arfsten, I feel better about Max Arfsten as a depth option than I do, or did, I guess, about like Shaq Moore or Joe Scally back in 2022. So yeah. I feel like there has been an improvement in this group.
Yeah, because, I mean, Yedlin was a great defender. I think he's in that squad because he's the only player that has World Cup experience. I think the only outfield player, at least, because of missing 2018. So I think that's a big reason why he's in there. It's kind of veteran know-how and knowledge. And then as a experienced backup, but certainly not as capable at that point in his career as some of the options we have now. And I think that goes for Shaq Moore as well. And so I think it is, Graham, to your point, Dest in a better situation, a more comfortable position where he's getting more minutes. Jedi, even with the injury and sort of inconsistency this season, is still such a strong performer, and I think will continue to be so for Fulham or any other club that comes in for him, because he is often consistently linked with moves away. But then Max Arfsten has cemented himself in Pochettino's plans. We should mention Pochettino in the kind of estimations here. I do think that matters, but we can talk about that later. But Arfsten seems very much a player who fits with what the coach wants and the profile of player that the coach wants. And then Freeman has just kind of come on since his debut, where it felt like, okay, like I see the rough signs here. I see what people are hyped about. Now we just have to see if he can kind of keep improving and keep building on it. And I feel like he has, such that he gets the move he has, that he is in the squad the way he is, and I think is such a good player and such a reliable backup. And that doesn't even mention that like we could include Tim Weah here, potentially, depending on how we want to play and how he's being used. So I think there are different looks and different possibilities, but all of them fit with what we want from those players in that position. So I think it's definitely a stronger group overall.
Yeah, I think it's just Jedi Robinson that's the question mark here. Where if you're getting the real Jedi Robinson, then I totally agree that this group is stronger. If you're not, and he's not at 100%, I don't really know that you can say it's stronger, right? So that is the question. I think the depth is better, and there are players I like more in Alex Freeman and in Max Arfston than Shaq Moore and Yedlin. Scally's the same yesterday, today, and forever, right? As we've already talked about. So if Anthony Robinson is the same dude, then I totally agree. If he's not, and I'm a bit worried that he's not, then that's a problem. But mostly I agree with the group.
Yeah, because, I mean, the reality is, like, if we were having the same conversation ahead of 2022, if Jedi had picked up an injury, I think I would feel more concerned about Shaq Moore and or DeAndre Yedlin as a potential left back than
I think so.
Max Arfston. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Very good. Okay. Joe, would you be so kind as to move us on to the midfielders? Specifically, we'll go central midfield, the defensive midfielders, the non-attacking midfielders in the middle. Let's do that.
Yeah, let's do it. I think that's a helpful way to think about this because usually with the U.S. nowadays anyway, it's the double pivot sort of deeper in midfield and then the two more attacking, half-spacey kind of guys that are narrow, not truly wingers, but we'll talk about those guys later. I think in this group, last time around, you had Tyler Adams, Yunus Musa, Weston McKennie, Luca De La Torre, Christian Roldan, and Kellen Acosta. Those are the 6 names that I think fit into this category last time. I'm just going to run through. Tyler Adams, I think, is steady. Injury-prone then, injury-prone now. Still really good, was good then, will start for the U.S. if he's healthy. Yunus Musa, big old decline, and probably the most relevant decline of any outfield player. Musa was so good for the U.S. at that tournament. He was one of the better players on the field in that game against England, and it just hasn't clicked for him since then. And I still think there's something in there. I really do. I just don't know what that is, and I don't think we're going to see it in this cycle anymore. That is a legitimate loss for the U.S. Like, Musa was a plus starter at the 2022 World Cup, and now he is not. And I don't know that there is anyone who's going to fill that, but we'll get on to that in a minute. Weston McKennie, in the same way that Musa's dropped, I think McKennie's improved in a way that very, very few U.S. players have since the 2022 World Cup. A lot of these guys have kind of stagnated or gone the other way. Adams has sort of stagnated, right? And that's fine. I think this is just who he is. You look at Christian Pulisic. I think he's improved, like Weston McKennie has improved. But Jedi Robinson and Dest are probably about the same. Richards maybe a little bit better, but a lot of these guys haven't taken the step forward that Weston McKennie has, where he's, I think, in the form of his life right now and is a really, really good player. He's improved. De La Torre is steady, and that probably wasn't going to bring a lot then and isn't going to bring a lot now, won't be on the roster. Kellen Acosta has declined. He's out of the picture for sure. Christian Roldan, I think, has improved in a real way. And sort of the question in all of this is, does McKennie's improvement, an improvement from Roldan and Tessman and any of these other depth players like Aiden Morris, who I wouldn't have at the World Cup, I've said that before, Jack McGlynn, Sebastian Berhalter, those guys, can you make up for Musa in those players? I don't really know the answer to that question. I really don't. I don't know. I would say probably not, but then maybe it's still a little more complicated where now all of a sudden if you're not playing with the MMA midfield and you're just playing with 2 of those guys, and McKennie and Adams, well then can you make up for Musa in a Malik Tillman or in one of the players higher up the field? And maybe the answer there is yes. So on balance, I think when I look at this whole roster, and it does get a little hard to just do one position group here, I think this pool is not worse. This midfield pool is not worse. I think it is maybe better because McKennie is just that good and the depth is good enough that it's going to help the U.S. on balance, and maybe you get a little bit more out of the attack without the MMA midfield. But I definitely don't think it's worse, even though we can clearly see that Musa is not the same player now that he was in 2022.
I feel worse about the starting group and better about the general pool. Like, even guys, like, if we're talking about the depth of this group, I sometimes feel like the only one who threatens to be like a Johnny Cardoso truther on this show.
My bad. He's in my notes. Totally forgot about it. My fault.
Like, there's a guy who's starting for Atletico Madrid. Like, he's back in the team. He scored in the Champions League the other night, and we spoke about him on Monday.
Also
was really good against. Yeah, that's true. But your commitment to your role, Joe.
No, it was a great goal. It was a great goal.
But even like Johnny Cardoso is like at a level I feel that depth has improved quite a bit from 2022. But the MMA midfield I thought was sort of like the core strength of the US team at the last World Cup, and that's fragmented because Musa, as you say, Joe, is no longer in the picture. So yeah, I don't really know where I land on this one. I could be convinced either way, I think.
Can I ask you guys?
I shall do some convincing when Joe is done. Go ahead, Joe.
Oh no. You should go first. I'll clean up.
I want to say again, I think this is where I can't shake the manager part of this question, because like I think I was pretty adamant in my Greg Berhalter defense at the time in 2022. I felt like he was doing the best he could with a group of players. I know not everybody agreed with that, but I do think Pochettino being here is such a safety blanket, at least for me, that I feel like there is a better understanding of how the U.S. can create and how the U.S. wants to play. And I feel like there is more a unified approach or a unified identity through this team at present and through this squad at present. And that bleeds into, like, with Zimmerman, like, yes, great 1v1 defender, and Ream the same, but then it's like, can either of them pass? Is that where the passes are going to come from? With the midfield, it felt like we needed that Musa maneuver spark, because I'm not sure where, like, the midfield creativity was coming from. And now with Pochettino, like, I don't think he wants Musa doing that dribble and having those carries. I think he wants
He doesn't
a bit
want Musa
more
doing anything, to be fair.
Well, that's true. But I think, like, that's where that thing that was such an asset, I'm not sure if it would be an asset now, even if Musa were playing as well as he had been in 2022 and had kind of progressed on. So I think that colors my understanding of this group. But then looking at it more individually, like Tyler Adams, like you could say is in a similar situation, but I feel like with Leeds in that season, they just barely avoid relegation. He's kind of doing what he does best, but it's in an uncertain situation that I think made development more of a challenge, other than sort of like desperation defending and like fighting tooth and nail to stay alive. Whereas Bournemouth, I feel like even with the injury, it's more stable, it's more of a known role, there's more consistency and chemistry, and I feel like that allows him to add new aspects to his game or new wrinkles to his game. The same goes for Weston McKennie, who I think has improved, to Joe's point, but maybe not in the way that I expected. I thought in 2022, coming out of that we would see a player who gets a better first touch and has more like polish to his midfield game. And instead, I think he hasn't really fine-tuned as much as he has just improved overall. I think he's become an even more versatile player where he can do a number of different things based on what's asked of him. So I don't think that like puts him into a specialized role necessarily, but I think it means that he could be one of these more defensive midfielders. He could be one of the more attacking midfielders. He could also not be in the squad at all, if you believe some reports, but I don't. He's in there for sure. So I think like those two improving, Christian Roldan improving in the ways that he has while staying consistent and the same is a positive. Musa, to your point, Joe, is the only one that I had as really declining in a meaningful way, because Luca De La Torre and Acosta, like kind of marginal impact in my mind, even if Luca De La Torre was Christian Pulisic's enforcer across the board. And then I think Tessman, Berhalter, Morris, Johnny, all being in the conversation and having kind of strong arguments for what they're doing at club level at present does make the pool more positive in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, it's inarguable that the depth is better, really across this whole team, right? We talked about it, fullback, center back, all right, maybe it's a wash. Certainly in this part of the field, I think absolutely in the attack. Like, this team is deeper now than it's been. And part of that is credit to Poch, because he cycled through a bunch of players to find some of those guys. Also, part of that is just, I think, a natural evolution and a needed one of this pool, because it didn't seem to be clicking on the depth front, and now it is. So that's a good sign. I want to ask you guys, thinking about the impact of Musa, because I do think that's a real thing. This is maybe a bit overly reductive, but would you rather have Adams, McKennie, and Musa and Pulisic, right? Sort of like Pulisic is going to be in this equation as an attacker who's on the field regardless. I'm trying to account for a shape change here, basically is what I'm trying to do. Adams, Musa, McKennie, and Pulisic. Or Adams, McKennie, Pulisic, and Tillman. So basically Tillman or Musa. I know there's more factors that go into this, but just of those two players and how you think they would fit in the U.S. group in 2022 for Musa and Tillman today, which of those is better? Because I know this blends across the position groups, but I think that sort of is the question, because Musa's spot would be taken up by either another center back, which then opens up the opportunity for you to put somebody else in the half spaces, or it would be filled some other way. I think I probably would prefer Musa 22 over Tillman today, which maybe crystallizes some of this for me. Graham, where do you fall?
That's a really good question. I think Tillman, and if you're to compare just the two individual players, Tillman is in a better place in his career now than Musa was in 2022. But I felt really good about the MMA core.
Is he?
Like, yeah,
I mean, I hear what you're saying, but worth noting, Musa at that point is playing 1,300 minutes for Valencia. The season after that, 2022-2023, he plays 2,000 plus minutes. That's a career high for him.
Surely you'd rather be at
but
Leverkusen than Valencia, right?
So I hear that. He was doing all right at Valencia, but like Tillman is, as I often will talk about,
the new Florian Wirtz.
Bundesliga is a little bit of a blind spot for me, but he's like a key player for Leverkusen, right? Like he's. Yeah, so he's gonna play more than 2,000 minutes this season for Leverkusen, even accounting for the injury that he had earlier in the year. So yeah, in terms of comparing the two individuals, I think Tillman is in a better place than Musa. But to repeat my point, like the MMA worked really well. Like I really liked the balance of that. Yeah. It felt unimaginable to me that unit was going to completely disintegrate so quickly as it did over the next like couple years. And now Musa's not even in this squad. He's not even in this discussion. And so I'd quite like that central pillar of the team back. If it was possible.
I agree. Sounds nice.
Yeah.
Very good. All right, why don't we take a quick break? When we come back, we'll talk about the attacking midfielders, the strikers, and then we're going to ask if the pool now is more talented than it was 4 years ago. Join us then. Total Soccer Show. Welcome, everybody, back to USMNT Weekly. We are running through the 2022 roster and seeing how far we've come. Taylor, would you like to guide us through the attacking midfielders, the half-space guys, if you will?
Sure. So I think in this group, the way we kind of divvied it up, we had Pulisic included, we had Weah, Reyna, Aronson, Ferreira, and then it depends on where you want to put Jordan Morris, maybe, because I think he was used in a number of different roles.
Ferreira was the 9. He started as the 9 in that game against the Netherlands, and I think Morris was a winger in that group. But it really doesn't matter.
So you want to do that then?
Yeah.
Should we flip those around?
Why not?
All right.
Let's
All
do
right,
it.
Morris goes in here. Morris goes in here. It's an odd one because I think a number of these players, I would say 2 of the players have definitely declined in that way.
Ooh.
2 have improved. 1 I am genuinely uncertain about, is how I would have it. But I think this is another one where the depth and other options makes up for some of that decline. But I think Pulisic is in a much better position, is in like the prime of his career, it seems, is producing, even if he's not scoring as often as he was at one point for Milan. I think still just being such a key performer for them and an established performer at that makes him like improved in every single way. Other than that, maybe Pochettino occasionally has his frustrations with Pulisic, but he is one who I think has improved. Brendan Aronson this season is key in my sort of saying that he has improved, because it feels like he still does the things that we've always expected of Brendan Aronson, working really hard, being very scrappy, fighting for every ball. But like there was a point in time when I felt like, okay, I see it now, Joe. Like he can't complete a pass. He dribbles into the wrong areas when there are other wide open options. He kind of doesn't pick his head up. And I think like even if that were still the case, it seems like he kind of worked his way into Pochettino's good graces. But then we've also seen just better performance from him and being a little bit cleaner on the ball and better in his passing and better in his distribution. And I think more comfortable with Leeds this season, maybe a little bit more appreciated by Leeds supporters this season. And so I think some of that is intangible, but overall I definitely have him as an improved player. Excuse me, that was my way of transitioning into Weah. Weah the player. I don't know. I think he is around the same or maybe has improved because he's added new aspects to his game. But Weah, I think at one point I said around 2022 was the U.S. player I thought was most capable of achieving like superstar status. Like he just felt like he had all the intangibles off the field, but then on the field, coming through PSG the way he did, making some of the moves he has, it felt like, here we go, this is going to be a guy who's going to score a ton of goals as a winger and then maybe do the Henry thing and transition into an out-and-out number 9. And instead it's kind of gone the other way and gone from a 9 to a winger to now like a wingback/fullback for Marseille this season. And so he's one who I think, with that said, doesn't fit as cleanly into what Pochettino wants of this position group. And so I'm unclear how he fits aside from being sort of a change of pace option or maybe like a different wrinkle in the fullback wingback spot. So I don't think Weah the player has gotten worse necessarily, but I don't think he has progressed in the attacking ways that I thought he might. And then Gio Reyna would be the other one who I feel like has just kind of, it's the same old story, but that same old story now 4 years later is even worse because it's fewer minutes, it's injuries, it's inconsistency, it's a new club where he is again injured and again not starting regularly. So it feels kind of like more of the same, but 4 years later, that has to be labeled as decline.
Yeah, I just can't get Weah the player as a new nickname out of my head.
Is anyone else writing a children's book in there?
I was looking at Graham, and Graham was beaming the whole time, and I almost couldn't keep it together. It wasn't even that funny.
Trying to hold off the giggles there. I've not had a lot of sleep this week. I think Taylor Weah seems to have come full, in his club career anyway. Seems to have come full circle. He seems to have, like in 2022, he's at Lille as a wide player. And everyone, there was that discussion, where's he going to transition to? And then he tried that, and he's gone to Juventus and had that period in his career. And now he's ended up in a similar position in the same league he was in 2022 for a team that's at the same level or similar level that Lille was in 2022. So I feel like he's come full circle. In terms of his national team standing, I don't think there's any doubt that he has been knocked down the pecking order to such an extent that when I was coming up with when I was doing research for this episode, I kind of forgot about him and then went, oh yeah, Tim Weah, I have to fit him in somewhere. So he might end up in the starting lineup at the World Cup. I wouldn't rule that out, but I think we've had this discussion before. It's not entirely clear what his role is in this team. And in 2022, I think we all knew he was the kind of the source of verticality in that team. Scores, right, in what game was that at the World Cup? He was a key player for the US in 2022, and I no longer feel that way about him heading into this World Cup.
Yeah, I think Weah at best has remained steady, and he's never been a guy who produced. He had that little stretch with the U.S. and World Cup qualifying ahead of 2022 where he did put up some goals and assists and was really effective there. At club level, he just doesn't beat players on the dribble. Like he's a straight line player who can also go east-west a little bit, but he's not good at knifing at you diagonally on the dribble, and that's completely limited the ceiling of his game at club level and for country as well. And Poch doesn't really seem to know how to use him. So I don't know if he's going to be in the lineup or not. I think if the U.S. is in a sort of a 4-2-3-1, then we could see Dest and Weah play together on that right side. We've seen that before. If it's a back three, I think it's Dest or Weah in that right-sided width holding spot, and Dest probably has the inside track. So it's a problem, and Poch has talked about how we don't have a lot of wingers, and so Weah is kind of the only one that was around before, and he's still kind of the only one around now. I still think that the attacking midfield, half space, I know Weah kind of breaks this position group a little bit, but this group of players is better now than it was before, right? Reyna is the same in that he's an idea of a soccer player who's consistently excellent for the U.S. when he's on the field, but you cannot count him to be on the field. Pulisic has improved, I would say. Aronson has improved. Morris doesn't matter, really. Tim Weah roughly holding steady. Now you add in Malik Tillman, who's a contender to start for the U.S., even though I'm still not totally enamored with his game. I think he's a good player that should be in these squads. Luna and Zendejas are other options in this group, and I think they're better than the depth, certainly, that you had last time. So to me, it's blindingly clear that this group, I don't think anybody's disagreeing with this, it's just is really obvious that this position group is better now than it was before. I would just love it if some wingers could pop up, but we've talked about that recently as well, and some of the reasons for that, I think, also.
Yeah, I think it is. Go on, Taylor.
I was going to say, the only thing that I think is really interesting about Reyna is how, like, as we all remember, there's the whole fallout with him, and there's the frustration with his extremely limited role or whatever he says it was, and the kind of social media outrage about him not starting and not being like the key player for that U.S. attack when he is coming off a season in which he is injured for most of it and misses huge chunks of it and only just kind of returned to fitness. It feels like we are in a similar situation now, and yet all of the social media responses I see are basically just like, get this guy out of the team, like he shouldn't even be in the conversation. And I don't agree with that, but it's crazy how much the narrative on him has shifted. And in that way, I think Tim Weah is the one who I expect a lot of neutrals and casuals to sort of be like, why isn't this guy starting? He's such an electric performer. He was so good. He scored in the last World Cup. He should be starting every single game. And if the U.S. kind of fails to create or score some goals in one of these games, I feel like he will be the one that people get really frustrated about, even if there are obvious reasons why he isn't starting. With all that said, I think overall, the individual players, I think, have largely improved, and then I think the depth is just significantly better.
I think in a macro sense, Reyna has surely regressed from 2022. Like, I think for the national team, he is very much in the same place, but if you look at his club career, in 2022, he's still widely thought of as one of the best young players in the Bundesliga, and I don't think anyone, like even accounting for age, I know he's got on a little bit now, I don't know if you'd count him as a young player, but even just assessing his quality in the Bundesliga, like he's still not played games for like season on season. He played 22 games in the 22-23 season. He hasn't played that many games in a single season since that World Cup. So I think that's why there's been the narrative shift on Reyna, is at least in 2022, like, yeah, he'd been out, injuries were a problem for him back then too, but his performances were still recent enough that we thought of him as a better player than we do now, in a macro sense, is how I word that.
I guess if you want to think about it that way, that's fine. Although that was the 2021 season, so it was a full-on year before the World Cup. I guess at least half a year, I suppose, before the World Cup had happened. Doesn't matter. Winter World Cup, dumb, et cetera, et cetera. Reyna is the same, though. Like, he's been a concept of a soccer player since that 2021 season when he played a bunch of games. He's played like 400 minutes, 600 minutes, 400 minutes, 300 minutes. I mean, that's just who he is. And the quality of his performances has remained the same along the way. But yeah, I think we all agree here. It's just semantics, really.
All right. Last but not least, let's take a look at the striker pool. So we've got our Jesus Ferreiras, we've got our Haji Wrights, we've got our Josh Sardents in there. Taylor, who else we got? Is that it?
I should note, Giorena is 23 years old at present. Correct. So plenty of time. Plenty of time for things to turn around. 2030. That's what you should be targeting. For now, I mean, I think this is the one. I think this is the position group that is the biggest upgrade, biggest improvement overall from where we were in 2022. And I remember being very concerned about who was going to score the goals for the United States. And worth remembering that this is a position group that leaves Ricardo Pepi off. That was probably the most controversial decision Greg Berhalter makes with the roster selection, is choosing not to bring in Ricardo Pepi. Instead, it is a combination of Josh Sargent, Haji Wright, and then we're putting Jesus Ferreira into that conversation as well.
See.
And nowadays, I think Balogun looking strong, scoring goals. Ricardo Pepi, even with the broken arm, looking strong and scoring goals. And then Haji Wright still in the conversation, and I think being a good performer for a Coventry team, still targeting promotion. Big Pat coming into the conversation and scoring goals in the championship and seeming like he fits a lot of what Pochettino wants or likes, or at least gives him a different look. It definitely seems like there is more talent, depth, and opportunity in the number 9 pool. It's still not a slam dunk position group by any stretch of the imagination. I still would love for all of those players to score more goals and look more consistent and look more polished in their club careers. But generally speaking, I think it is a much deeper and stronger pool at that than it was in 2022.
Yeah, I mean, the U.S. doesn't have any slam dunk position groups. Never has. It's going to be a while before that actually happens. I can't remember the phrase you used there, Taylor. So this is not a slam dunk by any means, but it's better. And it's obvious that it's better. Balogun, I mean, basically, if you add Balogun...
I want to push back on that, Joe, but I cannot.
Yeah.
You're totally right.
Yeah.
Like, there's no group that I'm like, that is an A+ in my book.
Right. Just doesn't happen for the U.S. at this stage.
Manager?
I mean, if
Coach,
you add Balogun and Richards and maybe like Tillman, I suppose, over maybe Musa and I guess it was Sargent who had the most starts of the striker group, and Walker Zimmerman, yeah, it starts to feel pretty good. Like, you start to feel pretty good about the improvement of this team, and then you're reminded about the goalkeeper situation again, which brings me back down to earth slightly. But the striker spot, without a doubt, I mean, the 3 strikers that I would take to the World Cup, Balogun, Pepi, and Ajiman, I would rather have, I think, any of those guys playing minutes than the guys who got minutes in 2022. I think.
Same.
I'm not
take that?
100% married to that idea, and Ajiman is the one that makes me really consider it. But I mean, we're in the ballpark with that take. I don't think that's an outrageous take, and I think other people could get on board.
Yeah, I mean, the 4 that I've got, Morris, I know, might have been included as a winger, but Ferreira, Sargent, Morris, Haji Wright, the 2022 version of Haji Wright, who is playing for Antalyaspor in Turkey. Am I being too bold and saying none of those players in that moment in 22
Correct.
would be in this current pool?
I
So
agree.
that right there tells you how much improvement there has been. And I hear you, Taylor, like, yeah, it would be great to have Haaland or Mbappe or whatever. I feel like compared to other national teams...
Someone should put in a phone call.
We can look into something. What was that listener question we had a couple of weeks ago? The $1 billion, $100 million USA rule. We should look into that. But I feel like compared to other national teams, certainly on the USA's level, and maybe this is the Scottish national team fan shining through here, I think the US pool, number 9 pool, is actually okay. Like, Balogun is scoring goals at Champions League level for a Big 5 club. Ricardo Pepi is doing it consistently in the Eredivisie and looks like he's on the brink of a move to the Premier League. And then you have 2 strikers at the Championship level who are among the top scorers in that league this season.
Haji Wright scored a hat-trick last week.
Exactly. I feel like this is clearly, until this number 9 position pool, I could feel like I could be swayed either way on whether this squad has gotten better or worse or has stayed largely the same. This is the thing that tips me over the edge of, like, yes, it is meaningfully better because you need to score goals to win games, and these players are better at scoring goals than the ones we had in 22.
Very good. Okay, so we got to the big question, haven't we? Is this pool more talented now than it was in 2022? On balance, Joe, what's your feeling?
I think so. This exercise was fascinating to me because it sort of revealed, I think, where the U.S. clearly has gotten better. Places like striker, places like center back, and areas that matter a lot. Or maybe they have gotten a little bit worse, which is the guys who are going to be playing some of the minutes in central midfield, as we talked about, and certainly in goal. I do think on balance, we saw the U.S. drop off a little bit with their level as the World Cup went on last time. At least they were found out against the Netherlands in the round of 16. Maybe that was a tactical problem. Maybe there was some other issue. Or maybe the players were tired. Certainly looked like Todd Adams was a little leggy in that game. I think especially with this new format, the depth is going to matter a lot for the U.S. at this next tournament. And the U.S. has more of it, and it's better than they did last time around. So I will say yes. I don't think this team is obviously better, and I don't think the expectations for them should be especially high at this World Cup. but I do think the team is slightly better and is slightly better positioned across the board for success.
Joe, if this team plays the 2022 team, who wins?
Probably this team, but like 51, 53 times out of 100.
Okay.
You know, if we outlaw draws and just play it out, you know?
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think I might give the edge more to the present team more consistently. And again, I think a lot of that has to do in the end with the coach, which is not meant to be a shot at Greg Berhalter, because I liked him in 2022 and I understood why he was there. But I think of it now in retrospect and in hindsight, and so much of the conversation was around trusting the process, about how the system was going to be the creator, about how once it all clicked, it would all kind of function. And there is some truth in there, but at the same time, what that meant was that you're still trying to get all the first-team players understanding their specific assignments and understanding exactly what's being asked of them. And then at the same time, any players you're bringing through have to kind of get up to speed with their assignments and responsibilities and with the style of play in a way that makes it sort of clunky and a little bit slower of a process. And I think it means that it's just harder to kind of find that form that you need to catch fire in a tournament. And by contrast, I think there's been a practicality to Pochettino's approach. I think he has nuance in his tactics and can give this team different looks. But I think what it's allowed for is players to come in and show their best qualities. And then Pochettino, I think, has found ways to make that function and make those best qualities utilized within a team. And so if you're going to have Luna doing what Luna does, then I think he has other players who can kind of supplement that or make up for the negatives in Luna's game. And I'm not sure we had as much balance in that way or much variety in that way under Berhalter. And so I think that alone gives me more positivity about the U.S. at the next World Cup.
Okay. Graham, progress?
Yes, I think so. In a macro sense, I'm a little bit concerned about a few key players and their fitness and their form. To go back to Jedi Robinson, I think it's clear he's such an important member of this team, and so I'd like to see him get a consistent run of games between now and the end of the season and see the player that he was last season. I'm also, in a micro sense, a little bit concerned about Christian Pulisic. In a macro sense, totally agree he's come on a long way since 2022. He has started one game in the last month and a half, and Stefano Pioli has talked about how he's managing his minutes and how he can't overcome some kind of minor injuries that he's had. He's not scored a goal in 2026, and some of this is, not purely down to him. Milan have been pretty poor in 2026. But I'd like to see the Pulisic of the first half of the season before this World Cup. So I still have some question marks there, but looking at the pool, yes, I think it is. I think it's certainly deeper. I think that's indisputable that this pool is deeper. I think there's a few areas you can dispute, like the starting figure, certainly in midfield. But I feel quite positive having done this exercise.
Very good. Joe, anything to add, or should we wrap it up?
I thought I was going to add something and then decided I wasn't. That's just good podcasting.
Hey,
this is
life.
podcasting, folks.
That's how life goes.
Good.
Yeah.
Very good.
I think to your point, Graham, like if Pulisic isn't there in 2022, I don't know how we attack. I don't know how the attack functions. Even with like Tim Way in a more natural position and feeling more comfortable, I think that was a player that, like, if we didn't have him, questions get asked really, really quickly. And I think with this team and the way Pochettino's built it, and with Pulisic not being there this summer, I think they've had to find different ways to deal with that. So even if Pulisic couldn't go or got injured or just didn't rediscover that form, I think it's less of a critical blow than it would have been in 2022. I'm not saying it's not a blow. I'm not saying it doesn't create big problems for Pochettino, but they feel slightly more manageable than I think they would have last time around.
Marvellous. Thank you very much. And thank you to Alabama Footy 26 for posing the question that inspired this here episode of USMNT Weekly. Before we hang up the old headphones, we want to go to our TSS Scouting Network and read out a couple of the scouting reports that have come in so far. Lots and lots of reports have come in so far. Here's a few of them. Taylor, would you like to kick off with one of the reports?
I would love to. It's so nice to have these back. Ryan Mock scouting Snyder Brunel, 18-year-old midfielder for the Seattle Sounders. What a name. Snyder subbed on as an injury replacement in the Sounders' first game of the season in the 59th minute of the first half. It was a weird game, says Ryan. He is correct in that regard. Snyder seemed generally fine, if occasionally not quite on the same page as his teammates in the attack. I guess that's the generally part of things. Multiple Seattle injuries in this game might mean he plays a lot more going forward, so seeing general competence is a good sign for the teenager.
Very good stuff. Thank you very much, Ryan Mock, for that one. Ryan Mock isn't my alter ego, by the way. It's genuine listener.
It's Ryan Maley is your
It's the command that you give yourself when Graham brings up Scotland. Ryan, Mock. I think that's how this works. We also should note these
Ryan
are all
GPT, yeah.
We've themed all of these to be young U.S. prospects for today's show.
Yes.
Keeping in theme.
Indeed. And keeping on that theme, Graham, who have you got?
So this comes from Ed Ritter, who's scouting, is it Adri Mehmeti from the Red... Joe, Adri, do we not have a pronunciation
Don't know.
of the first name yet? We'll just call him Mehmeti. He was one of the Red Bulls kids from the weekend who became one of the biggest talking points from opening weekend of the MLS season. 16-year-old defensive midfielder for Red Bull New York, if calling them that, if we're obligated to do so. So Ed says Mehmeti got a surprise start in the Red Bulls 2-1 win in Orlando, and he was one of the 3 starters 17 and under. First time that's ever happened in league history. He was 41 out of 46 passing, had an assist along with 3 tackles, 6 recoveries, and won 3 to 4 aerial duels. The only downside for him, Ed says, was a loose touch that earned him a yellow when he tried to regain possession. No less an authority than Herc Gomez said that he was possibly the best player on the field against Orlando. Mehmeti was not deterred by the physicality or speed of play and had a dream debut and was later named to MLS Team of the Week. And having watched this game, Joe, you know that I was putting messages in our Slack during this game. I would agree with all of that, and maybe we should have a scouting report on Michael Bradley after one game as the next USMNT head coach as well, because everything about Mehmeti and everything about the Red Bulls kids, including Michael Bradley as their manager, was very impressive against Orlando.
Also very impressive is Ed Ritter's return. Ed is one of the OG Scouting Network members. I think he scouted Ben Mines way back when, another Red Bull product. So he's a Red Bull guy through and through. Thank you, Ed, for sticking with us.
Wow, that's a clarifying reality of the youth landscape right there.
Oh, yeah?
Everything you just said.
Is Ben Mines still a professional player?
He is. He plays in USL these days.
Nice. Thank you very much, Ed. We appreciate you. Galen Morley has sent in this one. Galen's scouting Christopher Cupps, 17-year-old centre-back with the Fire. Cupps made a 76-minute appearance in the Fire's season opener. Unfortunately, he then failed to clear across to Ezequiel Ponce right after he subbed on, which allowed Ponce to take the shot, which Guilherme then collected for Houston's winning goal. There were a few safe passes out of the back, followed by a mistake which nearly set up another opportunity for Houston. Mixed afternoon for Cupps.
Yeah, it was a rough one for Cupps, who is very talented. It was at the U17 World Cup was sort of a rock for the U.S. at that tournament. Everybody for Chicago, almost everybody, was pretty bad in that game. Cupps was culpable in the way that was mentioned here in this report. But week 1, sort of a mulligan for Chicago. They're missing key pieces, but a good sign that Cupps got on the field. So that is encouraging, I think, even if the performance itself was not.
There you go. Thank you very much, Joe. Who would you like to take us to next?
Royce Alvarez has been in touch scouting Landry Walker, a 16-year-old midfielder for San Antonio FC in the USL Championship that season. Ideally, starts not this weekend, but next season, although there is no CBA with the USL Championship players and the USL. I don't know. Not sure what's going to happen on that front, but Landry was called up, Royce says, to the US U17 national team squad that qualified for the upcoming U17 World Cup in Qatar. He made 3 appearances in the 3 matches and played as a 6 in all of the matches. I will just add, thank you for that update on Landry Walker, Royce, that San Antonio are one of the leaders sort of in developing players in the USL. And so I would say when someone is coming up through their system and getting U.S. youth national team appearances, that's somebody to watch. So I'm going to keep my eyes on Landry Walker as well.
Joe, was it South Georgia Tormenta that just folded as well?
Yes, they
2
did.
weeks before the season starts?
Yep.
Interesting times in USL with no CBA in place. Let's move to happier territories, shall we? Let's talk David Beffert scouting Matisse Albert, 16-year-old left winger for Borussia Dortmund. I wonder if it's Matisse Albert. Who knows? 3 Dortmund youth prospects, Luca Reggiani, Samuel Inazio, and Matisse Albert, earned their first senior call-ups against Wolfsburg due to injuries. Reggiani was the only one to see action coming on in the 90th minute. Albert did not feature, has been playing regularly for Dortmund 2 this season, but cool to see him make the senior team, albeit as a bench option.
Matisse Albert is the new pronunciation meta for Matisse Albert. That's what it is now. I'm just not going to say anything different in the future.
Matty Albert.
I like it better. Is that bad?
No, I think it's fine.
Okay. Matisse Albert is definitely getting a move to Strasbourg. He's a Blue Coal player within 18 months.
Yeah. His dad, Philippe, will guide him there.
Love it.
Matty Albert and Way of the Playa. Now that is a rap group I need to listen to.
I would 100% be on board with that.
There we go. Excellent. Thank you for everybody who sent in their scouting reports. If you'd like to join the TSS Scouting Network, you can go to patreon.com/Total Soccer Show. Please congratulate me in reading out that Christopher Cups one and not going with Houston's 2 goals, 1 cups. But I guess I just did. Hey!
You just did.
Here we are. Taylor Rockwell, thank you very much. Play on player.
Thank you, my friend. I enjoyed this week. Somebody talking about how the internet can't hurt me ever. I lived through 2 girls, 1 cup era, and I'm glad that Ryan did too, and it appears Graham did. Joe, avoid.
Yeah, I will. Don't worry.
Keep avoiding Joe. Thank you very much.
Hey, thanks, Ryan.
And thank you very much, Graham Ruthven.
Thank you, Ryan Bailey.
Listener, thank you the mostest for joining us on this one. We'll be back on the feed very shortly indeed, but for now, bye.